A new anime is coming this October, Sanda. From Beastar's creator Puru Itagaki, daughter of the Baki the Grappler author, comes a bizarre, absurd, and thought-provoking story. Brought to life by Science Saru, the studio behind Dandadan. In a future Japan where birth rates have collapsed and children outrank adults, Christmas has faded into myth. Middle schooler Sanda Kazushige discovers a mysterious connection to Santa Claus himself, pulling him into a strange and dangerous world. What insane truths lie within this dystopian holiday nightmare? Let's find out. The story began with a brown-haired boy remarking in his thoughts that a girl's butt was apparently ice cold, which was because a girl was sitting on top of him. He added in his mind that he had no time to think about that now, since she was holding a sharp knife and was poised to stab him. When she attacked, he managed to twist his body just in time and avoided it, causing the knife to strike the floor instead. The boy was utterly bewildered by what was happening. As he was about to call her name, she looked up and stared straight at him, yet she continued to swing the knife relentlessly in his direction. The boy called her Fuyumura and tried to calm her down, asking what on earth was happening. While dodging her strikes, he admitted she was frightening him terribly. The girl stood and moved closer, addressing him as Sanda Kazushige. As he stepped backward, Sanda asked why she was calling him by his full name, wondering what he had done. He thought he did not understand, because just earlier, everything between them was fine. As they had agreed, they had gone to class early. They had even cleaned the dirt from the window so that it would slide more smoothly, and they did a good job and had managed to finish their class rep work. Suddenly, Fuyumura approached the window and opened it, but it creaked loudly. Sanda was puzzled that it still did not slide properly. At that moment, Fuyumura raised the knife again, her gaze filled with malice. Sanda ran quickly, asking if she was furious with him simply because his cleaning had not been enough. He begged her to wait and told her to stop, yet she continued chasing him. In his thoughts, Sanda admitted that he had once dreamed of being straddled and chased by girls, but he questioned why it was actually happening now. He had no idea what the reason behind it was and kept wondering what he could have done to Fuyumura. Just as she was about to stab him again, he froze when another student opened the classroom door. The newcomer cheerfully greeted them with a good morning, impressed that the class reps had arrived so early. Both Sanda and Fuyumura feigned indifference, responding together with a good morning as if nothing had happened. The arriving student added that it was extremely cold outside and that it might snow that night. Sanda asked if that was so, while Fuyumura still clutched the knife, which made him wonder if she would stab him if he spoke again. The classmate continued, saying the weather forecast had predicted snow, and everyone had freaked out upon hearing it. Fuyumura then leaned closer to Sanda and whispered that after that day was over, she would kill him. Sanda froze at the weight of her threat. After a short while, the rest of their classmates arrived. While others chatted noisily, the two of them remained quiet, sitting side by side at a table. Fuyumura was reading a book, while Sanda sat frozen in fear. Yet when a classmate behind Sanda spoke to him, he conversed happily. However, once the teacher entered and class began, he fell silent once more. As he listened, an idea entered his mind. He blushed at the thought, wondering if perhaps Fuyumura had feelings for him. They had been together as class reps for 8 months, yet during all that time, he had never once seen Fuyumura's expression change. Still, she was a girl. He looked at her and reasoned that during puberty, both boys and girls became awkward and mean, but using a knife seemed far too extreme. That convinced him that this was the answer. What she really meant when she said she would kill him before the day ended was that she would confess to him. He looked to the side, thinking that he had finally caught her. He could hardly believe that a girl was now interested in him. That, he thought, could very well be the greatest day of his 14-year-old life. When it was time to change into their PE uniforms, another classmate spoke to Sanda, telling him that his foolishness would send him to an early grave. Sanda was puzzled by those words. The boy pressed further, asking just how stupid he could be. He could not believe Sanda had been attacked with a knife. The boy started to walk away, saying he would report it to their teacher. Sanda pulled him back and told him not to ruin Fuyumura's chance, insisting she was only shy. The boy then asked if he had any idea what was really going on inside her mind. He pointed to the desk that held flowers and a photograph and said that in his view, The death of their classmate Ono was the reason Fuyumura had lost her sanity. Sanda realized he was right. Ono and Fuyumura had been friends. He asked if it had already been a week, and the boy confirmed, saying it had been about that long, and that the two were always together. Sanda walked to the desk and looked at Ono's picture. He thought that because of this, all the more he needed to listen to Fuyumura's reasons. When they left the classroom, his classmate told him he should avoid being alone with Fuyumura for now. Sanda appreciated his concern. He apologized for bothering him about his love life, but he said it was no problem. Fuyumura followed behind them. While running outside, Sanda remarked that August was cold, but it was already December, so he wondered why it felt so freezing. His classmate replied that in the past, this was normal during December, though those days were long gone, and there was no longer any Christmas. Sanda had no idea what he meant and asked about it. According to his classmate, that day was Christmas, the 25th. It had once been a holiday when children received presents from a man called Santa Claus, a large man with a white beard. Sanda was utterly clueless about it and thought it sounded creepy. Concerned about his clothes, his classmate asked if he was really sure about not wearing a jersey jacket. Sanda answered yes, saying the cold did not bother him. Fuyumura stood silently at the side, and when Sanda looked at her, he was struck by a strange sensation in his body. Just as the forecast had said, snow began to fall, and they were amazed by it. They could not believe it was snowing in December. They wondered if they had stepped into a portal back to the past. Sanda's friend was baffled that it was real snow, and he thought the day had only grown stranger because of it. He was then startled to notice Sanda clutching his chest and collapsing to the ground. Worried, he asked what was happening and if Sanda was all right. Struggling to speak, Sanda said it was his heart. His classmate insisted that it was cold and that he needed a jersey, so he removed his own to hand it to him. But Sanda refused, saying he did not need it and that he was fine. He could not understand what kind of pain he was feeling. It was as though his heart was swelling upward into his chest, and it hurt unbearably. Fuyumura was shocked to hear this. Other classmates approached him out of concern, but Sanda only turned toward Fuyumura and thought he had never experienced this kind of love before. His chest was tightening, his heart hurt so badly, and it felt as if he was dying. Because of this, he realized she was the one. They spoke inside the classroom, and in his mind, he believed that Fuyumura was meant to be for him. He strengthened his resolve and prepared himself for what she would say. But all she began with was telling him that she had forgotten her eraser. She looked at him, and Sanda, flustered, hurried to answer that he would take care of it, digging through his pencil case to find one. Fuyumura thanked him for attending the rep meeting even though she knew he was not feeling well. He replied that it was no problem, that he was not the type of boy to run from such things. He then asked her to confirm if she was done attacking him with the knife. Suddenly, Fuyumura asked why he was being so kind to her after she had threatened him earlier. Sanda had not expected that, and simply handed over the eraser she needed. Fuyumura then asked with curiosity if it was because he was a descendant of Santa Claus. Sanda was stunned by the question. She went on to say that he was so stubborn, refusing to wear their school's red jersey, which made her wonder if he was really that afraid of others discovering his true identity. Sanda, smiling, asked what she meant. His mind caught on her words about him being a descendant of Santa Claus. He wondered what on earth she was talking about. When Fuyumura reached out for the eraser, Sanda placed it in her palm, but as soon as it touched her hand, he trembled and felt another surge of pain through his body. He was bewildered when Fuyumura told him that almost all the steps to lift the curse were now complete. On December 25th, when the snow had fallen, while he showed no concern for himself, he had spread love to children and granted the children their wishes. To lift the curse, it was necessary for him to do those two things, and they had succeeded. She added that she was close enough to qualify as a child in that regard. Sanda, struggling to endure, protested in confusion. The sudden collapse of health from headaches or heart palpitations, he thought, could happen to anyone. Fuyumura explained that when such things occurred, it was a sign that their true power was beginning to emerge. However, it only functioned if all of the many conditions were met. Most people simply died from their illness. Then Fuyumura pulled something and said that the final condition to lift his curse was for him to wear something red. Sanda was completely shocked by this and demanded to know what she was talking about, telling her to stop. He said that he was always trying to be kind to her, yet now she was trampling all over his motivations. He could not believe her claims that he was spreading love to children and giving out gifts. He denied knowing anything about that Santa Claus Misigas, dismissing it as nothing more than an old fairy tale, some Fantasyland nonsense. He added that the reason he had been so kind to her all this time was because, for the longest while, he had liked her. That was the real reason. He had planned to confess his feelings sooner or later, but now, she could forget about it. He demanded that she return his heart. Fuyumura insisted that he was wrong. She told him everything was the product of his Santa Claus instincts. She moved quickly to force the jersey onto him, but Sanda managed to evade her. He told her to stop and just listen. Fuyumura agreed, but only if he wore the jersey first, then they would talk. Sanda stubbornly refused, saying he would never wear it because he hated the color red. Fuyumura would not give up and chased him, trying to make him wear it. Sanda, growing curious, wondered what her deal was with all of this and with the whole Santa Claus matter. Fuyumura then pulled out the knife and said she no longer had any choice. She would make sure it happened. Sanda was unprepared when he saw the blade again, and without hesitation, she drove it into his chest. He had no chance to retreat or dodge. Fuyumura pressed that she would force him to wear red. The knife sank deeply into him. Sanda protested and asked her if she was serious. He wanted to know why. As the snowfall continued that day and their classmates began heading home, Fuyumura spoke to Sanda, who lay collapsed on the ground, telling him that dying alone without anyone noticing was frightening, wasn't it? She said that Ono had not died. Everyone had only acted as though she were dead because she had vanished from their dorm and no one had seen her for 6 months. But in truth, she had always been inside, reading her books. How could she possibly have died somewhere outside? A flashback followed, showing the two of them talking. Ono told her that she liked her name, Fuyumura Shiori. Fuyumura was startled and found it hard to believe. They had been in the library at the time, a year earlier. Ono shared that Japan had once experienced 4 seasons each year, with the landscape changing along with the passing of those seasons. She said she remembered this because of Fuyumura. Her name suggested winter, her skin was as white as snow, and she was very quiet. Yet as a person, she carried all the colors of every season. In that way, she was very colorful. Fuyumura fell silent at the comment, not knowing how to respond. Ono laughed and said that being with her always made her feel as though she were experiencing each of those seasons. Then she reached into her bag and handed her a gift, greeting her with a Merry Christmas. Fuyumura stepped back, surprised and confused. Fuyumura explained that perhaps she was the only one still holding on to that ancient tradition. Embarrassed, Fuyumura admitted she had nothing prepared in return. But Ono was simply happy to give her the present, saying that next year they would celebrate Christmas together again. In that way, they could wish each other a Merry Christmas and exchange gifts. Back in the present, Fuyumura said that perhaps someone in the school had locked Ono up, or maybe. She could not finish her thought, growing alarmed as she realized that Sanda was not transforming into Santa at all. Instead, he was dying. She desperately tried to wake him, insisting that Santa Claus was supposed to have an incredible power to help children, and she needed that power now. His power was the only way she could find Ono. She shook his body, saying he could not die, that she had never wanted him to die. She admitted that Sanda was the only person she had thought she could turn to for help, and if he let go of that hope, then Ono truly would be lost. That could not be allowed to happen, because Ono had promised they would celebrate the next Christmas together. As she thought about the snow falling on that Christmas day, she remembered Ono and believed she would have been so happy to see it. She wished she had managed to give her a gift that year. She confessed that all she wanted was to see Ono again. Standing before the now bloodied Sanda, she whispered a Merry Christmas to Ono. At that moment, the entire classroom shattered. Its ceiling, windows, walls, and even the floor broke apart. Fuyumura was stunned, wondering what had just happened, as if a massive earthquake had struck. Sanda's legs suddenly lifted, and he broke into laughter, repeatedly letting out a booming ho-ho-ho. He pulled the knife from his body, and fear spread across Fuyumura's face at the sight. Somehow, Sanda managed to rise to his feet, laughing uncontrollably. Fuyumura stumbled back from him, unable to comprehend what was happening, while he continued to roar ho-ho-ho. He ripped apart his school polo, tearing it to shreds, and his physique transformed into that of a muscular man, a sight that left Fuyumura in complete disbelief. She kept retreating until her back pressed against the blackboard, pushing herself upward to stand. Fuyumura could not believe her eyes when she saw that Sanda had transformed into an old, muscular man with a beard, wearing nothing but underwear. When she called him by his name, he looked at her in confusion as snow blew into the room through the shattered windows. Sanda clutched his head, saying the family curse of the Sanda bloodline should have been sealed within him. He demanded to know how she had figured out what to do, and he asked just how much she knew about the release of the curse, calling her Fuyumura as he spoke. Sanda then noticed the wound on his chest slowly closing. Fuyumura was astonished to see him healing. As she approached him, she explained that the bond between Santa and the children who believed in him could not be broken. A simple stab was not enough to stop it. Sanda grew curious at her words about children who believed in Santa, but said it was not some cutesy thing. He pressed her, asking who she really was and how she knew his true form. Fuyumura, in awe, realized with certainty that Santa Claus was real. Sanda paused at her reaction. Fuyumura was only 14 years old and stood 182 centimeters tall. He wondered if it was only the perspective from above that made her seem so much like a child, but the Fuyumura before him was undeniably a child. She came closer and held his hand, pleading that she needed his help. She said she had to find Ono. Sanda wondered whether that was a Santa instinct or just common decency, but deep inside, he wanted to see that girl smile again. After all, children were meant to have smiles on their faces. He tightened his grip on her hand and promised that they would find her. The snow-white curse, he thought, had befallen over his teenage years. In the next scene, a hand was shown, at first appearing blurry. But as he pulled it away, its form became clear and bright. It turned out that the transformed Sanda had simply been staring at his own palm. He wondered if this was what they called being over the hill, past one's prime. Sitting on the toilet bowl, he questioned why things farther away appeared so clear. He then tried to speak and noticed how his once cute, adolescent voice had changed. He touched his cheeks, searching for the bright face that had once earned him a nickname. He was suddenly startled when the door banged loudly, kicked by Fuyumura, who demanded how much longer he was planning to stay inside that cubicle. She told him the whole school was in a panic after he had destroyed the building, and at this point, surely no one would freak out after seeing a huge naked man in the hallway. Sanda could not accept that thought. Outside, firefighters who had arrived were already evacuating people from the school, making sure that both teachers and students were safe. Sanda finally stood up, and because he was not used to his large body, he bumped his head against the door. As he stepped out, he muttered that it was hell. Fuyumura, curious, asked what he meant. Sanda looked back at her and said the only redeeming aspect of himself had been his cuteness, which more than made up for his lack of height. Without that cuteness, he was not himself. Fuyumura replied that's quite the phrase in his current appearance. Sanda, worried, asked what he would do if he never returned to normal. Surely his life would be hell if he remained a burly Santa Claus outside. Fuyumura believed he would eventually return to normal if he was simply given time. What had to come first, she said, was the fulfillment of his promise. But Sanda insisted that his appearance should come first. Fuyumura shouted back that what mattered first was finding her missing classmate. Frustrated, Sanda cursed and pulled something out. Fuyumura asked what it was. Chewing, he answered that it was Pachiko gummies, the one thing that kept him going. Luckily, he had brought some with him. Nothing, he said, could beat eating those when his mind was troubled. Fuyumura was shocked when she noticed his appearance changing. Sanda added that maybe it was something like smoking. He was suddenly surprised when, as he stared at the packaging of the gummies, his vision suddenly grew sharp. He looked up at Fuyumura standing before him, realizing he's back to normal. Those were the gummies he had eaten since he was a child. They had no nutritional value, filled only with artificial colors and flavors. He could hardly believe that such a thing was what had turned him back into a child. The next day in class, Sanda sat staring at the Pachiko gummies he had brought. Meanwhile, the teacher told the class that yesterday had been extremely hectic. The collapse, she explained, seemed to have been due to the old infrastructure of the building. Since the main school building would undergo reconstruction, they would temporarily hold classes in the science room. Sanda let out a sigh, admitting to himself that he had no idea what was going on anymore. He told Fuyumura that he had thought about it all night. Although he had promised to help her find Ono, he confessed that he truly did not know how he was supposed to do it. Fuyumura was surprised at his admission. He said that being a descendant of Santa Claus did not change the fact that he had no understanding of what he could or could not do. And now that the curse had been lifted, they had no idea when he might change back into his other form. Honestly, he added, that was a little frightening. Fuyumura then assured him he did not need to lose sleep over it. She said she had already come up with a plan. Curious, Sanda asked what it was. Casually, she answered that she had planted a bomb in the room, and it would explode in 1 hour. Sanda was left speechless at her words. She went on to say that he would need to use his power to either find the bomb, or make everyone evacuate, or force her to reveal where it was hidden. Or, she added, he could simply wait patiently and see whether the bomb she mentioned would truly go off. Sanda froze, unable to move. He looked at their classmates at the table and asked Fuyumura why she would ever do such a thing. She replied that it was to find out what abilities Santa Claus possessed. She said she was trying to determine what kind of ability he would manifest for the sake of the children. Of course, she said, she would use the lives of the 22 people present there for that purpose. Sanda could not answer her. As he looked at her, he knew well that this girl was not the type to joke about such things. He remembered how she had stabbed him before just to pursue her goal. So Sanda stood in the middle of the class and shouted to get everyone's attention. Because of that, both his classmates and the teacher turned to look at him. Struggling, he announced that there was a bomb inside their classroom. Fuyumura remained silent as he said it. In his thoughts, Sanda wondered what the hell he was saying. He added that they should evacuate while there was still time. Instead of taking him seriously, the class did not believe him. Even the teacher told him to be quiet during the lesson. His classmates laughed, saying he was spouting something stupid again. One of them even joked that he should not worry, since he had not studied for the quiz either, so they could just blow up together. They said he was always like that, and no one ever knew what he was going to say next. Because of their reaction, he sat back down, thinking that he had no idea what he had expected by doing that. He whispered to Fuyumura, asking if there really was a bomb at all. She answered that he was free to believe whatever he wanted. Annoyed, Sanda realized his only options were to spend an hour searching for the bomb, or to sit there restless while waiting for it. So he decided it was time to look for it the old-fashioned way. He called out to their teacher, saying he had dropped a box full of pins there earlier that morning, and asked if he could look for it on the floor now. The teacher responded that they were in class. Sanda insisted, saying he was too worried about the missing pins to focus on the lesson. He said he would never forgive himself if anyone got hurt, so he wanted to find them immediately. After pleading, the teacher finally agreed, saying Sanda would make sure everything was safe so that the rest of them could focus on writing their paragraphs. He dropped to his knees to act like he was searching for the lost pins. But deep inside, he thought he should have planned this better. Even a grade schooler probably would know better than to search for a bomb under desks than he did. He told himself to use his head. When his eyes landed on the blackboard, he realized that the day's activity was to write a composition. The topic was what they most wanted right now. He thought the timing of that topic was too perfect, given his situation, where Santa Claus was sitting in the same room. Because of that, he felt even more pressured. Everyone began writing their activity in class. Sanda stood up and noticed that all of them were earnest in their writing. It seemed they truly knew what they wanted. He felt bad for them, thinking that Santa was nothing more than a good-for-nothing like him. In truth, he wished he could just sit with them and write about how much he wanted a road bike. But he told himself he could no longer return to being an ordinary student. While the others wrote seriously about their wishes, Sanda thought that he did not want to remain a large old man who could not even fulfill his promise. He told himself that his curse had already been lifted. Everyone else was writing what they wished for. He wondered what the real Santa would do in that situation. His classmates stayed busy, some deep in thought over what to write, others chatting about the topic. Meanwhile, Sanda prepared himself, reached for the jersey, and thought again about what the real Santa Claus would do. The teacher then announced that time was almost up and asked if they were finished. But when she turned, she was shocked to see a huge man, bare-bodied, gripping Fuyumura by the neck. The students were terrified. The transformed Sanda declared that no one should panic, or he would crush Fuyumura's neck. The entire class could not believe what they were witnessing, and the teacher screamed, while Fuyumura's face remained expressionless. The panicked teacher ordered him to release the student, demanding to know who he was and how he had entered. But Sanda told them again not to panic. He claimed he was a thief, then corrected himself, saying he was a robber. Then he changed his words once more, declaring he was a terrorist. He shouted and ordered everyone to leave the room immediately. He demanded that they bring him 10 billion in cold hard cash, or else the girl would be harmed. The classmates, who called her Ofuyu, grew worried for her. And since they still did not move, Sanda shouted again, ordering them to do what he said immediately. Because of that, they finally left the science room. Out in the hallway, they worried over what might happen to Fuyumura. Their teacher tried to calm them, assuring them that everything would be fine. Judging by the ransom that man was demanding, it seemed he was not very intelligent. She told them not to be careless in provoking him and said she would call for help. When only the two of them were left in the science room, Sanda released Fuyumura. She remarked that she was surprised by him, saying she had not expected he would have the guts to do that. Sanda replied that his body was pretty convenient. He only needed to put on the red jersey to transform. Fuyumura then lifted her vest and said he had done well in his search because hidden beneath it was the bomb he had been tasked to find. It was a real bomb strapped to her body, its timer ticking down with only 5 minutes and 17 seconds left. Sanda swallowed hard in fear, realizing she had not been joking at all. She answered that she never bluffed. This was a real test for him. She added that she had no need for the help of a Santa who could not even save children from a bomb like that. She was confident she could find Ono on her own. Sanda could hardly believe she had almost used the entire class as collateral, willing to let them die just for that. But she told him they had not died, so he should not cry over hypotheticals. That, she said, was just a bad habit of adults. She declared that he had found the bomb, and now everyone would live happily ever after. Sanda was furious, thinking that girl was nothing more than a shitty brat. Fuyumura, curious, asked how he had known the bomb was on her. He remembered the topic written on the blackboard and fell silent before answering that she was the only student who had written nothing on her paper. Indeed, her paper was blank. Sanda admitted that he did not know the Santa way of doing things, but he believed Santa would worry about a child who could not wish for anything at all. He knew she was carrying a heavy burden after what had happened to Ono. He could read how painful that class was for her, and that was why he stopped it. He said he could have asked where she had hidden the bomb, but he never would have imagined it was actually strapped to her. She then picked up the paper from the desk, prompting Sanda to ask if she was listening to him. Fuyumura only stared at her paper and said she could not write down what she wished for. Her memory drifted back to Ono and the time they had shared ice cream. She admitted to herself that she knew the terror of losing her was far greater than the joy of having her by her side. She thought of Ono's smile as she looked at her when they were together. Sanda then came closer and said that the happiness of being with her again would surely surpass even that. Then that makes the days she spent with Ono her greatest treasure. He said they'll get it back. He then paused, wondering if he had already defused the bomb. Moments later, the science room exploded. The wall burst open and desks and chairs flew from inside. Amid the blast, Fuyumura managed to shield herself behind a table. She could not believe he had taken the hit after shoving her beneath a desk. She cried out Sanda's name, deeply worried for him. In her thoughts, that Santa had surpassed every expectation she had of him. She peeked out and called to him. Flames engulfed his entire body, yet he answered her. She thought by now she had identified 3 of his traits. First, Santa could transform whenever he wore red. Sanda shouted as his body continued to burn, and the concern on Fuyumura's face was clear. But he only called her a ditz, telling her that he was serious about what he just said. The second trait was that he turns back into a kid whenever he ate Pachiko gummies. Fuyumura could hardly believe he was still responding to her. Sanda declared that it was her guts that had caught him, and because of that, they would find Ono no matter what. The fire, it seemed, was not affecting him too much, so he thought he could deliver her present through the chimney. Standing there wreathed in flames, Sanda proclaimed that this was his promise to her as Santa Claus. Fuyumura could not believe it. The third trait of Sanda, revealed before her eyes, was that he was immune to fire. Coughing through the blaze, yet still voicing his ho-ho-ho, Sanda remarked that he thought this was a little beyond the level of an ordinary chimney fire. After the incident, Fuyumura visited Sanda's place carrying a box of Pachiko gummies that contained 120 packets. When she opened the door, she was surprised to see what a boy's room actually looked like, since she had never entered one before. Sanda laughed and apologized, saying it was messy. Inside were several double-deck beds, and Sanda shared the room with many dorm mates. Fuyumura said she had brought him a box of he knows what. He was shocked, then overjoyed, and thanked her, knowing immediately that it was the Pachiko gummies. After handing it to him, Fuyumura said she would be leaving. Sanda's dorm mates were curious. Amayuta Kazushi recognized that it was Fuyumura. Dazono Ake pointed out that she was only wearing her casual clothes. Magi Hajime seemed irritated, remarking that Sanda had a girl, and Utagawa Uri added that she was even in their room. So when they all headed out to eat, Dazono suggested that Utagawa should get Sanda. Hungry, he wondered aloud if the cafeteria would already be packed. Utagawa rushed over to Sanda like a reporter, asking what kind of relationship he had with that girl. Sanda played along, answering that he would first need to book an appointment for an interview. Though they often spent their days joking and playing around with friends, the truth remained that they were considered national treasures. At that time, in the 5th year of the Tenchi era, there were only about 50,000 Japanese citizens under the age of 15, making up merely 0.1% of the population. At Daikoku Eigo Academy, this small and precious segment of society was enrolled, with the institution taking on the responsibility of both protecting and educating them. Other major schools also shared this heavy burden. While Sanda and his friends sat in the cafeteria, a banner hanging nearby read Tenchi Era Year 5, Daikoku Eigo Academy Marathon. A teacher passed by and reminded whom he called Utagawa-kun that he had not yet submitted his Math 2 sheet. Sitting there, he admitted it had slipped his mind and apologized to the teacher. In this era, teachers consistently used formal speech with students, the opposite of how things had been in the past. Sanda wanted to believe that they were truly fortunate and that such a system worked in their favor. While they were eating, Dazono remarked that he felt the food there tasted worse with each passing year. Amayuta replied that the entire country was struggling now, so they had no right to complain about it. Utagawa added that at least they had meals with meat in them. He then asked Sanda for his opinion, but Sanda only smiled with his eyes closed. In his Santa Claus form in his mind, he thought to himself that it was true. Children really were treasures. He could not help but think how adorable they all were. Returning to the conversation, Sanda smiled and agreed with Utagawa, saying they should make sure to eat their fill. His friends at the table were puzzled. Utagawa asked if they had not noticed something strange about him lately. The others agreed, saying Sanda had been acting weird. Sanda then reached for Utagawa's tray, saying he would separate the bad meat so he could eat properly. Utagawa was startled and told him to stop. He pointed out that Sanda had not even reacted when Fuyumura entered their room earlier wearing her sexy casual clothes. His behavior recently was odd, as though he had suddenly become too mature. He demanded that Sanda say what the problem was. Where, he asked, was the simple-minded, dumb, and annoying Sanda they had always known? Sanda was taken aback by his words. He began to think about what Utagawa had said regarding Fuyumura's casual clothes, but when he tried to recall, he could not picture her appearance at all. He decided to forget about reacting, realizing he had not even noticed that she had been wearing casual clothes. In his eyes, she was gradually becoming less like a member of the opposite gender and more like a child. He grew uneasy at the thought, wondering if that meant Santa Claus was beginning to emerge inside him as well. When he returned to the dorm, Sanda sat on his bed, restless as he thought about the changes his friends had been noticing in him. Someone checked on him, and it was Amayuta, whom he called Amaya. Sanda said he was fine and apologized for acting weird lately. He asked where the others were. Amaya told him not to worry about it, saying they had just gone to the bathroom. Amaya came closer, sat beside him, and said that they were only panicking. When you see a friend acting mature, he explained, you start to feel that you need to be mature too. But their entire generation was not yet ready to grow up. Still, he assured Sanda that he was not strange. Sanda was thankful and happy to hear that, saying he wished everyone could be as understanding. Amaya smiled and said he could not blame them, because unlike them, he knew who he really was. Sanda was puzzled by those words. Suddenly, Amaya pulled out a taser and shocked him in the neck. Caught off guard, Sanda collapsed to the floor. Just then, Dazono entered the dorm room, surprised to see Sanda lying there like that. He said they would go ahead and take a shower. Amaya replied that he would carry Sanda back to his bed and told them to go on ahead. He thanked him and even called him Prince Amaya. But instead of laying Sanda on his bed, Amaya tied him to a chair in another room. When Sanda regained consciousness, he realized he had transformed into Santa Claus. He was shocked to see that he was actually inside the blown-apart science room, dressed in their red jersey. He cried out for help, but that place was already off limits. He continued to shout, but someone told him not to be too loud. She asked what he would do if anyone saw him there in that form. He was stunned when he realized it was Fuyumura. Curious, he asked why she was there tied up as well. She answered that she had only just woken up too, and that the boy there was unexpectedly rowdy. Sanda turned in surprise to see who she meant. The boy insisted they had no right to call him rowdy, since the two of them had been the ones who blew the place up. Sanda was shocked when he realized it was his dorm mate, Amaya. Amaya admitted that he truly had not expected Santa Claus to be real. He apologized to them for bringing them there, saying he had no other choice. Sanda asked how he had discovered that he was Santa Claus. Amaya said he had seen everything through the window at that time. Everyone else had been freaking out and running away. But why? He asked. Would he ever let such a thing slip past him? Sanda thought to himself that it had been a stupid mistake. Amaya confessed he had been greatly surprised, honestly. He had never expected the cheerful boy in their class to be hiding such a secret. Sanda then asked what his plan was now that he had tied him up there. In his thoughts, he wondered whether Amaya intended to report him or sell him somewhere. Amaya answered that what he wanted from him was nothing in particular. The two were puzzled by his strange reply. Amaya pulled up a chair and sat facing them. Did he really think that all children would demand something from him? He told Sanda that he ought to start familiarizing himself with kids today, calling him Mr. Claus. What he wanted, he said, was simply to have control over others. And indeed, Santa's secret had been exposed to the wrong child. Amaya looked up and said that he was 14 years old. Literally, he claimed, that meant he could do anything. When it came to the minor protection law, even killing was not considered a major issue, so long as you were a child and the victim was an adult. There were even cruel people who killed and then went to school the very next day as if nothing had happened. The question now, he said, was what would happen to Sanda, calling him Grandpa. Sanda replied that he still remained 14 inside, but if Amaya intended to face him, then he had to release Fuyumura. But she refused. She warned that Amaya had no idea what would come his way if Sanda was harmed. It was interesting, he said, to see an adult and a child place such deep trust in one another. That was not something seen every day. Amaya paused, thought about it, then smiled. He said he understood. He then called to both Sanda and Fuyumura and said he would release them if they kissed each other. Simple enough, wasn't it? Both of them were shocked at his demand. Fuyumura asked if he had really said kiss. Was he certain that was all he wanted? Amaya stood up and demonstrated, saying that a plain old kiss would not do. They had to be into it. Sanda grew irritated while Fuyumura remarked that the bastard was enjoying himself. She told Sanda to just look at her so they could get it over with. Even so, Sanda's irritation was obvious. Even though Amaya was his roommate, he had never realized his personality was that twisted. How could he even think that he would simply go along with something like that? What was wrong with it? Amaya asked. What was the problem? But Sanda insisted that Fuyumura was still a child. Sanda would never touch a child. Fuyumura was puzzled at that and asked if he had forgotten that he himself was also 14 inside. Fuyumura moved her face closer and puckered her lips to kiss him, but Sanda turned away. He insisted that he was Santa Claus, and the Santa genes within him would never allow such a taboo to happen. But Fuyumura told him she would not let him go to jail until he had fulfilled his promise, so he had to kiss her. Sanda still refused, saying he would not do it. Amaya laughed loudly at the scene, asking what he was going to do. Surely, someone would come if they did not hurry. Sanda cursed in his thoughts, taking back everything he had ever said about children. They were too cruel, violent, and selfish. They were not adorable at all. With that realization, he thought that he did not have to be the cheerful old Santa Claus right now. He suddenly moved his legs, and skis shot out from beneath his feet. He broke free from the ropes that had tied him to the chair, shattering the chair itself in the process. Amaya turned to him in surprise, and even Fuyumura, now freed, was startled when she noticed the skis attached to his feet. Sanda declared it was time to punish him, calling him a shitty brat. Amaya only laughed and asked how much more fun they were going to have. Sanda tried stepping down with the ski blades protruding from his heels, and they made a clicking sound. Confusion was clear in his eyes as he looked at them. He tried swishing them against the floor to see if the skis would come off, but it only caused a huge crack where they struck, making him stare at it and think that his frustration had led to him gaining a weapon that could kill a person in an instant. This prompted Amaya to question if wasn't Santa supposed to keep his hands off children, and he pointed out that any punishment involving those sled feet of his could not possibly be that mild. In Sanda's mind, he admitted that this was one point of Amaya's that he could agree with. Santa would never do something like that, so he asked himself why then. He wondered why his body had become stronger, why he had become fireproof, and now why those ski blades had emerged from his legs. After thinking about it, he muttered with a tone of confusion and unease that he never realized Santa's powers were this beastly, and he questioned how this was any different from a weapon created to kill. As Fuyumura watched him, a look of concern could be seen on her face in response to what he was feeling. Suddenly, something caught Fuyumura's attention, and she turned in shock to see a wrinkled hand opening the door of the broken room they were in. The three of them turned their wide eyes toward it, and the one who opened it asked what was going on inside. As the person entered, in contrast to the appearance of that wrinkled hand, his face looked youthful, with a bright smile and long eyelashes, and he told them that students should not be loitering in a place like this. Amaya, with a shocked expression, identified him as the principal. After that, the principal told him that this science room should be off limits, and asked what he was doing here all alone. Amaya tried to explain that he was not alone, but when he turned to look for Sanda and Fuyumura, they had already vanished from his side. Because of this, the principal asked him what he was talking about, leaving him with no choice but to bow his head and say it was nothing. It turned out that Sanda and Fuyumura had managed to hide behind a toppled desk. The principal then suddenly grabbed Amaya's face with his extremely wrinkled hand, jolting him in shock. With an eerie tone, he remarked that his skin was as smooth as a boiled egg, and that being a child was truly the most precious thing in the world. He added that Amaya must have already heard the rumors about his age from his fellow students. He said he did not really intend to hide it, and informed him that he was turning 92 that very year. He explained that he was only able to maintain this youthful face through near-lethal doses of hyaluronic acid and collagen injections. He said he wanted to testify to the value of youth in Japan using his own body. And yet, he added, Amaya was wasting the exceedingly precious time of his life in a place like this. Because of that, he told him he was quite the sinful student. On Sanda's side, he thought to himself that he did not even want to imagine what would happen if the principal saw him like this, adding that everyone in this school knew about his extreme hatred for adults and obsession with children. After that, he introduced to us that the principal of their school, Daikoku Eigo Academy, was named Oshibu Hifumi, and he inserted the side comment that the man's hands still resembled those of a 92-year-old. He then explained that he was the sole authority of the school, and also an ardent believer that the school and its students would be the ones to restore Japan to its former glory. He added that the school's precept of providing trauma-free education came from his belief that trauma was what corrupted a child's personality. After that, we returned to Amaya's situation, and here Principal Oshibu pointed out to him that he was standing there all alone, and the fact that he could not keep up with the others convinced him that Amaya must have been traumatized in some way. Amaya shouted and tried to convince Oshibu that he had not been traumatized at all, and that he was absolutely trauma-free. Still, Oshibu did not believe him and said that his face itself revealed that something had happened, so Amaya continued shouting in desperation, pleading for him to believe him, and explained that nothing had happened and that he was happily living his life here every day. Because of this, Oshibu asked him why he had ended up in a place like this, which Amaya quickly answered by saying that he had not been driven out. Just as he was about to explain that he was only trying to confirm something, Oshibu raised his walking stick and used it to form a frowning brow upon himself. Oshibu then asked him if he could see that he was truly angry right now, and he explained that because of excessive surgeries, the muscles of his face had worn out, and now that was the only way he could express his emotions. After that, He said that lying children were just as unpleasant as the traumatized ones, and that it seemed a reform was in order. He then invited him to go to the underground, leaving Amaya with a terrified face as he tried to explain himself. Amaya screamed, begging to be released because he had done nothing wrong, but Oshibu cut off his words and requested that he not move around too much because, deep inside, he was still 92 years old. While this was happening, Fuyumura thought to herself that the underground the principal was talking about had always seemed to her like an old rumor, and now, hearing it firsthand, she was shocked that it actually existed. Afterward, she noticed that Sanda was no longer by her side behind the desk, leaving her confused. Next, Sanda suddenly burst through the wall of the science room, using his strength and ski feet, leaping in front of Oshibu and Amaya to stop them. Sanda and the principal's eyes met, and in the very instant he landed, Sanda slashed Oshibu's face with his ski feet and demanded that he let Amaya go. Sanda thought to himself that at least one good thing had come from his awakening as Santa Claus. He said it was his realization of just how abnormal this school really was. Amaya was shocked and asked what on earth was going on, while Oshibu touched his face and uncertainly wondered aloud if he should consider that painful. He then revealed the slash inflicted on his face from Sanda's attack, and explained that his face had undergone many layers of reconstruction, so bleeding was not really an issue. He added that what was far more important was the discovery of a fully grown adult here within school grounds. So he decided to call for assistance and pulled out what seemed to be a communications device. However, Sanda did not allow that to happen and swiftly kicked the device away from the principal's hand. Oshibu grinned after that and seriously stated that he admitted he was a little startled, seeing that Sanda had truly revealed himself, which seemed to indicate that he knew exactly who he was, but he added that he was not afraid of him. He pointed out that it was his duty to protect the children. Sanda responded that what a coincidence, because that was exactly his duty as well. He said that the reason his body had become so beastly was now as clear as day. He moved quickly after that, and it seemed as though he carved the letter S into the ground beneath Oshibu's feet, making Oshibu laugh and ask if he had just carved out his own initial there. But what Oshibu did not expect was for the ground Sanda had struck to suddenly collapse, causing his eyes to widen in shock. After that, while Fuyumura and Amaya were shielding themselves, Sanda added to what he had said earlier, that the reason his body had become like this was to protect those shitty brats from adults like Oshibu. After that, Oshibu pointed out his unkempt gray hair, the wrinkles across his entire face, his sunken cheeks, pale lips, and the dark eyes that had long since lost their shine. He added that not only was he trying to trespass, but that he was also an unsightly old-timer, and told him not to expect any mercy. Sanda replied that he was just as old as him, but Oshibu countered that it was not true and reasoned that his body had gone through the most extreme level of de-aging. While once again using his walking stick to form a frown, he asked if Sanda really thought just any old man would be qualified to run this academy. Sanda responded that if that was the case, then let him ask this, and he asked what Oshibu had for dinner the night before last, causing Oshibu to look at him with both confusion and shock. If he could not answer within 5 seconds, it meant that all that de-aging had done nothing for his brain. Sanda then began a countdown while Oshibu started to think. As Oshibu panicked, Sanda slowly pulled Amaya closer to him. The principal asked him to just give him a second, but Sanda kept counting down. When he reached 1, Oshibu uncertainly answered that he had eaten fish and vegetables, but thought that might have been last night. Not long after, the countdown reached 0, and Sanda declared time's up as he carried Fuyumura on his back and held Amaya in his arms, ready to leap out of the hallway railings. Oshibu suddenly screamed as this was happening. Then Sanda jumped, and using his ski feet, slid them down the pillar, while the reason Oshibu had screamed was because he had just remembered that what he ate the night before was boiled tofu. Fuyumura commented that only old geezers ate that kind of stuff, while Sanda told the two of them to hold on tight. When they reached the lower floor, Sanda quickly grabbed the ceiling of a hallway and, using his strength, pulled them over to the other side of the railing, making them land safely, though Sanda's back had to serve as their cushion. Because of that, Oshibu remarked that he hit right where it hurt, adding that it was to be expected from the almighty old-timer, Santa Claus. In the next scene, Fuyumura pulled at Sanda to get him moving, which irritated her as she pointed out how heavy he was and asked why he could not seem to move unless she dragged him. Sanda explained that he could not help it and asked how he was supposed to run with skis sticking out of his feet. Amaya then commented that he thought they were safe here on the dorm rooftop and said that they had nearly been caught back there. Suddenly, Fuyumura approached him and grabbed his head. To their shock, Fuyumura suddenly slammed Amaya's head against the metal railing, making Sanda cry out in alarm. The look of shock was clear on Amaya's face as blood began to drip from the spot on his head that had struck the railing. Right after, Fuyumura grabbed his collar and menacingly pointed out that he had tried to threaten them. He had tasered them, tied them up, and then threatened them, perhaps as nothing more than a stupid prank or something of the sort. Now that he knew Sanda's secret, she said he needed to be killed, adding that he should have just kept quiet, and this was his own fault. Amaya grew nervous while Sanda shouted in concern, telling Fuyumura to calm down. Amaya then began explaining that it was not like he wanted to do it either, and he said he had his own mission. Just as he was about to add something more, he looked intently at Fuyumura as if trying to imply something, while Fuyumura stared back at him in confusion. Sanda then addressed Amaya and told him that he was saying this to him as his roommate. He said that he did not think putting on a cool and gloomy face to earn someone's sympathy would work on Fuyumura. Fuyumura shoved Amaya even closer to the edge of the railing, telling him that he was an eyesore, which made Amaya cry out in fear, asking her to wait and pointing out that what he was saying was true. He informed them that he needed Sanda in order to bring back Santa Claus. He explained that his family had been running a cake shop for a long time, but it was now on the verge of shutting down. He pointed out that with the situation now, it was truly unavoidable. The number of children kept decreasing, and the condition of their country only continued to worsen. Amaya then asked them if that was not right, which caused Sanda to look at their school while thinking. He explained in his mind that their school building was once a massive shopping complex. He added that this country had been far livelier at one point. Many buildings from that era had now been abandoned and left to decay. Amaya then added to what he had said, that if the people of this country realized that Santa Claus was real, if they realized the legend was true, then they should start celebrating the event called Christmas again. He pointed out that this was exactly the kind of push their shop needed to get back up and running again, that they would once more be able to sell cakes to everyone like before, and they would finally be busy again in December. Sanda thought to himself that this was really strange. He said that people in this era no longer believed in Santa, and that only Fuyumura and Amaya still believed in him. He then asked himself that if his power came only from two faithful children, why did it feel like so much more strength was flowing inside him? Fuyumura commented on what Amaya had said, that it sounded so childish, and she did not even know if it was true or not, and she declared that she did not trust him, while Sanda was slowly calming himself from all of this. Amaya told her that at the very least, he should be more trustworthy than an adult. He pointed out that they had seen the principal themselves earlier, and that the three of them had escaped together from there. Sanda's ski feet then began to retract, returning his legs to normal, while Fuyumura told Amaya that even children would eventually turn into adults. She added that it made no difference whether he could trust them or not, and that everyone in that country would eventually turn into abnormal adults like Principal Oshibu, firmly adding that she could not trust any of them. Sanda then called out to Fuyumura and told her that what Amaya was saying was true. He said he could say this because he could see it. Fuyumura then asked if that was another one of Santa Claus's abilities. Slowly, Sanda raised his finger, drawing the two of their attention, and soon after he pointed to something. He explained that once you were this old, it became easier to see things that were farther away, and what he was pointing at was Amaya's family shop, which he said Fuyumura could see to the north. Sanda added that there was a sign there saying Amaya something, which Amaya happily corrected by saying the word written there was patisserie, while Fuyumura, puzzled, said that what was written there was presbyopia and asked if that was what Sanda was referring to. Sanda explained that his body would not hold up if he kept developing powers one after another. Besides, he added, that in itself was also an ability in its own right. He explained to Fuyumura that growing old did not just mean getting weak, and he could vouch for that. Amaya then thanked him, but he replied with wait, and said that there were things he still needed to confirm before he could listen to any requests. After that, he asked Fuyumura if she had any Pachiko gummies. Afterward, Fuyumura handed him what he asked for, and he was able to return to his normal form. He then said that everything that had happened that day would remain their secret as three, and that he did not want his identity revealed any further. He also informed them that Principal Oshibu might have his eye on them, and he added that as long as this promise was kept, he would make sure that nothing bad ever happened to the two of them. Amaya promised that he would never tell anyone, which Sanda said was good, and then he asked Fuyumura to give him her hand. Fuyumura did so, and with their three hands joined together like a team, they simultaneously said that this was a promise. After that, Sanda explained in his thoughts that Fuyumura wanted to search for her friend together. Amaya wanted Santa Claus to return for the sake of his family, and he said that as long as these two relied on him, his secret would not be exposed. But he added that he also wondered how Fuyumura had discovered his true identity and why she seemed even more determined than him to keep it secret. Fuyumura noticed him looking at her while she was examining Amaya's head wound, so she shifted her attention to Sanda. While this was happening, we returned to the hall where Sanda, in his Santa Claus form, had carved a massive letter S into the floor, leaving it wrecked, and here Oshibu was speaking to someone on the phone. He explained that there was no doubt, because the culprit behind the broken floor had carved his signature before leaving, a huge letter S. He also told the person on the other end that the culprit had a large build, a white beard, ski blades emerging from his legs, and those distinctive eyes, adding that it could only be him. He pointed out that this was the man the person's team was so desperately searching for, Santa Claus. He then said that it was time for the Redcoats to make their move, and he addressed the person on the other line as Officer Fuyumura. It was then shown that Officer Fuyumura was staring at what appeared to be a detective wall dedicated to the search for Santa Claus. In the next scene, we moved to Sanda's classroom, where he was picking something out of his female classmate Izawa's hair. Because of this, Izawa turned to look at him, making him freeze in surprise. Nervously, he thought to himself that he had touched a girl's hair, and he quickly apologized in person, to which Izawa shook her head, said it was fine, and thanked him. When Izawa added that Sanda was very kind, Sanda was left speechless, and just then a pencil case fell to the floor, scattering its contents everywhere. In his mind, Sanda thought with wide eyes that it had happened again. He explained that lately, the things around him, such as stuffed toys, milk boxes, coins, and other items, keep falling down on their own, which also puzzled Amaya and Fuyumura when he told them about it in the hallway in front of their classroom. Amaya commented that it was indeed strange and suggested that maybe it had something to do with how fidgety he was. He then asked if they should really talk about it in the open like this, to which Fuyumura said that since the surroundings were noisy enough, it should be fine as long as they did not speak too loudly. Suddenly, Sanda shouted that it must be connected to the abilities of Santa, which caused one of their classmates walking down the hallway to turn and look at them. As a cover-up, Amaya quickly greeted their classmate, calling her Abe, while Fuyumura took down Sanda and covered his mouth. Sanda apologized to them, but explained that he had been noticing that Santa's abilities were gradually manifesting in him. He also pointed out that only 2 children believed in him, and yet it was already doing this much to him. Fuyumura then asked how making objects fall could possibly be useful to Santa, which Sanda agreed with, saying that he himself did not understand how that would work either. Sanda then suddenly turned to Amaya, as though an idea had struck him, and he asked him to wait. He pointed out that up close, Amaya did not actually seem taller than him. He said that his own height was 161 centimeters and asked Amaya for his, to which Amaya replied with a smile that his was 170. Because of that, Sanda smiled with a lifeless look, as though embarrassed, and right then a flower vase behind him fell from the shelf. It shattered as soon as it hit the floor, making others in the hallway turn their heads at the sound. Seeing this, Amaya thought that perhaps it had something to do with lying, and he admitted that his actual height was only 168 centimeters. Fuyumura then said that hers was 182. Sanda frowned in irritation and said not to be so matter-of-fact about it, insisting that he had already given his true height. He then turned to Fuyumura, asking if she could at least give him 2 centimeters more from her height, saying that would be enough. After that, they returned to the issue at hand, and Amaya said he still did not get it. He had never heard anything about Sanda hating lies or anything like that. Since his family ran a cake shop, he explained, they knew a lot about Christmas. He pointed out to them that Santa Claus did not give presents to naughty children. As an illustration of how such a situation might happen was shown, Amaya explained that Santa Claus likely needed a way to determine whether a child had been naughty or not. Objects would fall when he entered the room of a naughty child, and when that happened, the child would wake up because of the noise. Santa could not allow himself to be seen by them, so he would have to leave the room without giving them any presents. Amaya then added that since Sanda was a descendant of Santa, his ability had been fine-tuned even further to the point that he could detect when someone was lying, and he pointed out that lying was, after all, the manifestation of a person's evil deeds. After he finished explaining this, Amaya proudly asked what they thought of his hypothesis, and Fuyumura praised him, saying it was pretty amazing. Just as Fuyumura was about to say what she thought they could do with this newly discovered ability of Sanda, Sanda thought for a moment and suddenly said that he rejected Amaya's hypothesis, leaving the other two surprised and questioning what he meant. He thought that if what Amaya had said was true, then the falling of the pencil case after Izawa had said those words to him when he touched her hair meant that what Izawa had actually been thinking at that moment was that he was really gross. Because of this, Sanda grew uneasy and imagined what Izawa might have thought. Feeling repulsed as she asked herself whether he had really touched her hair so suddenly, Sanda grew confused after that, holding his head in frustration as he yelled at himself in his mind that it was not like he had completely stopped caring about girls after becoming Santa, and he did not want to know whether a person was lying or not. Amaya then urged Fuyumura to try lying about something, which made her puzzled and comment that it was such an out-of-the-blue request, though she still began thinking of something to say. However, Sanda immediately stopped them and shouted not to do it while waving his hands. He began walking quickly away from them in irritation, telling them to forget they had even talked about it, adding that he was only imagining things. This made Amaya question why, while Fuyumura told him that this was their big chance. She also pointed out that with this ability, they could find someone who knew where Ono was. Fuyumura's words were suddenly cut off when Sanda bumped into someone. The person he had collided with turned out to be Principal Oshibu, and their eyes met. Unease was clear on the faces of Amaya and Sanda as this happened, and they both remembered the previous incident when Sanda had confronted him in his Santa form. Oshibu greeted them, specifically Fuyumura and Amaya, saying that he had been looking for them for some time now. Their schoolmates who were gathered around began whispering among themselves, confused as to why their principal was here. After that, Oshibu asked Sanda if he was indeed Sanda, while Sanda noted in his thoughts that the man's scar had vanished. Oshibu apologized to him and asked if he could borrow the two with him for a moment, especially saying Fuyumura, as he wanted to speak with her personally, and unease was visible on Fuyumura's face upon hearing this. Amaya and Sanda were left surprised when Fuyumura suddenly bowed her head. Fuyumura then spoke to Sanda and said that she had a secret she had not yet told him, which left Sanda stunned and asking what it was. Looking straight at Sanda, Fuyumura suddenly said that she loved him. She explained that since the very first day she met him, that had been her feeling, and the shock was clear on Sanda's face as his eyes widened. However, their moment was abruptly broken when one by one the fluorescent tubes in the hallway began to crack, and soon after, shards rained down around them, nearly hitting them. From this, Sanda realized something that left him speechless. Fuyumura quickly grabbed his hand and shouted that they had to run while this was happening. She added that now they knew for sure that his ability allowed him to know whether someone was lying or not. Amaya then commented that the lie had been so massive it was enough to shatter even the ceiling lights, while Sanda, deeply dejected, asked himself how much of a non-contender he really was in all of this. Afterward, Fuyumura told them that with this, they would finally be able to figure out Ono's whereabouts. She also urged them to test it out by holding a class meeting today, saying they might be able to discover where Ono was. In the next scene, they went to their classroom, and while standing before their noisy classmates, Sanda began to explain to them that it had been 1 month and 1 week since Ono disappeared. He now wanted to inquire about it once again. He told them that if any of them had any leads, he asked them to raise their hands. One of their female classmates asked in surprise if they were really doing this now, while a male classmate grumbled that they should not tell him they were starting to suspect their fellow students. Sanda remarked that he knew this was how things would turn out, and using his voice, he told the boy that was not what he was trying to say. Their male classmate then said that Ono was a bit of an oddball anyway, and pointed out that not many people had ever spoken to her. Izami agreed with the boy's comment, saying that he had not known Ono that well either, while Amaya quietly listened on the side. Another male classmate wearing glasses commented that Ono would probably be cuter without her glasses, earning a rebuke from the female classmate next to him that such a thing was all he ever thought about. Another one said that Ofuyu had been Ono's closest friend. Their classmates began sharing what they knew, such as Ono often just staying at her house. Someone suggested that they should all go and look for her, but another quickly said no, because he was far too scared. One even asked if Ono had already died, saying that was what the teachers had told them, but another answered that it was not true and that they still had not found her body. Others added that Ono was weird. One said he needed to use the toilet, and another confessed that he really liked Ono. One comment stood out above the rest, however, saying that Ono was already dead, and this caused the books stacked on the podium where Sanda and Fuyumura were standing to suddenly fall, as though a student there was hiding something. When the books finally fell and made a thud sound, they thought that it could only mean one thing, that someone was lying. Fuyumura's eyes widened as she turned to the books, and she seriously asked who it was that had just said those words. Sanda grew nervous and uneasy because the books had fallen. Fuyumura continued asking in all seriousness who had just said that Ono was dead, and when she reached those words, she shouted in irritation and eagerness to see who it was. Sanda caught her attention when she heard a thud sound beside her, so she turned toward it. When she looked, she saw that Sanda had collapsed on the floor, and their classmates immediately rushed over with concern because of his sudden collapse and the rolling back of his eyes. On the side of the weakened Sanda, he struggled to open his eyes and saw all of his classmates showing worry for him. As he watched them, he wondered if the concern they were showing was real. He thought to himself whether they knew that he was a descendant of Santa Claus. He pointed out that something always fell when someone lied to him: books, vases, ceiling lights. All of them told him when someone was lying. Looking at the books, he added that he could see through any lie. After a few moments, when Sanda regained consciousness, he began shouting that such an ability was unbearably rough. Amaya explained that he had been so uneasy about it that he ended up fainting, and he asked him if he was all right. Sanda then shifted his body as if to guard himself and told them to stop being kind to him, saying that he suspected they were only pretending. He then asked if they understood how it felt when someone said something to make him happy, but he had to be uneasy and keep watching for something to fall. This irritated Fuyumura, who clicked her tongue and asked if he was just a fragile 14-year-old, to which Sanda shouted back that for her information, yes, that was exactly what he was. He then explained that the thuds and thumps were like the sound of his heart gradually breaking, and he added that it was utterly exhausting. After that, he asked if he would never be able to return to his normal life again, and Fuyumura began explaining that it was said people lied at least 200 times a day. She then picked up a boiling flask and decided to show them how small and insignificant the lies he feared really were compared to everything else. Fuyumura began placing heaps of boiling flasks on the table beside them, drawing the attention of both Amaya and Sanda, who stared at them in puzzlement. Next, Fuyumura stood in front of the table and began thinking of Ono and saying that she was dead. Her eyes narrowed at those words, and she began to speak more lies as if she were quoting the words of their classmates. She said who even cared about what had happened to Ono. She began to say that she had been missing for more than a month and a half, and added that surely Ono was already dead by now, which activated Sanda's ability and caused the boiling flasks to begin falling one by one to the floor. Sanda was visibly shocked at the shattered glass scattering at their feet. As she looked at her reflection in the shards, Fuyumura continued and said that even if Ono had been abducted, there was nothing they could do about it, so it was time to move on. Thinking of their classmates, she said that even if one of them had been responsible, it had nothing to do with her, and she began punching the broken glass shards on the floor. Because of this, Her fists began to bleed as she continued to voice false words she did not truly mean, such as that it was time to forget and move on. She began to remember a moment when Ono had held her hand and commented that it was cold, to which she had replied that she would be angry if Ono said something like her heart must be warm or anything of the sort. As her fists continued to strike the sharp shards, she remembered Ono and the moment when Ono had told her that she loved her. After that, she said that Ono was dead and that they had to accept it and that they simply needed to forget she had ever even existed. After saying this, she unleashed another series of blows into the shards on the floor, making Sanda shout at her to stop, his voice filled with deep concern. Since Fuyumura refused to stop, Sanda and Amaya moved to push her away from the shattered boiling flasks, and it was clear how severe her injuries were as her blood continued to flow without pause. After that, as her blood was shown spreading across the broken glass shards on the floor, Fuyumura called out to Sanda and said that she will promise him one thing. She told him that she won't ever lie to him if she did not have this kind of resolve to do it. Concern and shock were visible on the faces of Sanda and Amaya as they listened. Fuyumura then added that if he truly was Santa Claus, then he needed to stop worrying about lies where the liar was not the one being hurt, and she said this while showing Sanda her bloodied fists. After that, she pressed her cut, bleeding, shard-filled fists against Sanda's chest, which alarmed Amaya greatly. At that moment, Sanda reached a deep understanding and began to speak in his mind. He suddenly transformed into his Santa Claus form, and in a tone of disbelief, he thought to himself if this was truly how his school life and Santa Claus were supposed to coexist. He then remarked that he felt his heart would not be able to endure it anymore. A few moments later, Fuyumura also looked at her hand and commented that it hurt so much, while Sanda worried over the blood that had caused him to transform into Santa, and Amaya shouted with deep concern that they needed to go to the infirmary right away. In the next scene, Fuyumura's fists had been treated and they had already left the infirmary. As they walked, Fuyumura said that it had taken 4 hours for the staff to finish treating her wounds, and she added as a side comment that the nurse had been sweating profusely while doing it. Sanda scolded her to be less reckless, while Amaya pointed out that it was getting dark and suggested they clean up the broken shards before heading back to their dorms. Sanda then asked Fuyumura who she thought might have been involved in Ono's disappearance. Fuyumura replied that at the very least, there was one person who believed Ono was still alive, and they had confirmed that. She said she was relying on the two of them to figure out who it was, and Amaya invited them to have a party once they found out. As they passed by a room, something inside caught Fuyumura's attention. When she turned to look, her eyes widened and sparkled. There she saw an individual standing in front of the window and staring outward. When that person turned around, it was as though the one she had been searching for all this time, Ono, had suddenly appeared before them. Fuyumura and the others were stunned when they noticed that the girl they had been searching for suddenly appeared right before them. Sanda approached her and asked if she really was Ono. She looked unsettled and then, without warning, hurriedly ran out of the room. Sanda, calling after her, quickly grabbed his jersey and said he would chase her. He thought it would be easier if Santa himself were the one pursuing, so he put on the red jersey and transformed. Fuyumura froze where she stood, which made Amaya ask if she wasn't going to follow. But she did not respond, not even blinking, overwhelmed by the unexpected turn of events. As Sanda ran after Ono, he felt a bad feeling. Why had Ono run away? What was happening to her? He slid down the stair railing using the skis on his feet and jumped off. But when he landed, he was surprised to find that he had not caught up with Ono at all. She was nowhere to be seen. After that moment, they never saw Ono again, even though they searched the entire school. They eventually rested outside, where Amaya treated them to drinks from a vending machine. Such a strange night, he said, called for something sweet and warm. As he handed out the drinks, there was no conversation, since they were all still in shock from what had happened. It seemed none of them had the courage to mention Ono at that point. Fuyumura, in particular, had not spoken a word since Ono's sudden appearance. In Sanda's thoughts, he wished she would say something. Perhaps it had not yet registered with her, or maybe she was angry at him for letting Ono escape. Or it could be that she was still reeling from the shock of seeing the very friend she had put so much effort into finding. only for that friend to run away from her. Because of the awkward situation, Sanda opened his can to take a drink, but ended up spilling it as he drank. Amaya was shocked, saying Sanda had downed the whole thing. Sanda was confused and asked Amaya what he was doing. Amaya insisted that he was the one who did that. He turned away, telling Sanda not to spill it on him. At least, he added, it wasn't tomato juice or something else, or else Sanda might have reverted back into his Sampa form. Fuyumura turned her gaze toward the two. Sanda was puzzled by the nickname Sampa. Amaya explained that he had tried to combine Sanda and Grandpa since he needed to give that form a name. But Sanda said he didn't like it. He then looked at Fuyumura and asked if she had a handkerchief since his shirt had gotten dirty. Fuyumura smiled at him. She laughed and asked if they were idiots or what. Sanda was stunned since this is the first time he saw her smile like that. She brought up what had happened earlier and asked if the girl they had seen was really Ono. Surely, that had been Ono, hadn't it? She said it felt like she was dreaming, and then she could not stop herself from laughing out loud again. Both Sanda and Amaya were bewildered by her reaction. Sanda just stared at her in shock, and even Amaya could only look silently at the sight. As Sanda watched Fuyumura smiling, something dawned on him. In his thoughts, Ono was alive. She had truly been there earlier. And Fuyumura did not care at all that Ono had run away, because for Fuyumura, Ono was. He could not finish the thought, as Fuyumura suddenly asked why Ono had run away. Amaya agreed, saying that was the big question. Fuyumura laughed again and said she was weird as always. Sanda thought to himself that hearing a girl laugh sometimes sent chills down his spine, because to him, it often sounded as though they were crying. So, while sitting beside her, he listened closely. The scene then shifted to the school gym, where a huge photo of Ono had been placed among many flowers. Tables were even arranged at the center as if for a program. When Sanda heard about it, he could not believe a school funeral for Ono was being held, and it was happening that very day. A teacher confirmed it, explaining that since Ono's family had not held a funeral, the school had decided to arrange one instead. The principal had told them all to gather at the gym after classes, dressed in full formal wear. Sanda and Amaya exchanged glances when they heard that. In their minds, it had only been 2 days since they had seen Ono, and they could not believe a funeral for her was already being organized. In the gym, the principal was adjusting the microphone. Deep inside, Sanda knew something about it felt off. He wondered what they might be hiding, and so he wanted to check it out. After inspecting everything, the principal, Ashibu, said that everything was set and the students would be arriving soon. The musicians were already there preparing. One of them mentioned that they had readied the red suits exclusively for events like this. Ashibu praised them, saying the suits looked well made. He then asked if they knew why red, instead of black, was now worn for the funerals of minors. The person admitted with unease that he did not know, though he had heard that black used to be worn for funerals. Ashibu explained that when a child dies, they should be sent off with a smile on their face. In a country where the birth rate was steadily declining, the death of a young spirit overflowing with potential was all the more tragic. Yet, there was also something almost sublime in it. That was why, in those funerals, they included music and carefully prepared arrangements. Looking toward Ono's picture, Ashibu said they should do their best to make this event splendid for the sake of the child. Outside, Sanda and Amaya were restless. Amaya said he would check on Fuyumura, and Sanda agreed. Sanda also observed the area, thinking it was important to scout around. He needed to find an adult behaving suspiciously. Peeking into the gym, he noticed the event looked extravagant, almost as though they were celebrating instead. Only now, after awakening as Santa, did he realize something was truly wrong with that school. Still, he thought he might not be able to join them, because the moment he put on red, his identity would immediately be revealed. Then someone spoke up, asking what Sanda was doing there. When he turned, he was alarmed to see Fuyumura behind him, strapped with bombs and carrying boxes of grenades. She declared that they were going to blow up the funeral. Behind her was Amaya, also carrying a box of grenades. Fuyumura was shown busy adjusting the bomb, as if it were no more than a hobby. In that era, even if someone was skilled at making bombs, nothing much could be said so long as they were still a minor. Because of that, she admitted she was glad to have been born in that time. It had been a close call, she said. Back to the present, Sanda called out to her. He told her they were done with bombs, demanding to know where she had hidden them. He insisted she could not involve the lives of other students in this. She answered that they were holding a funeral for a girl who was still alive, so she had to stop it. Sanda said he understood where she was coming from, but even so, he trailed off, unable to finish his thought. Fuyumura grew curious about what he had meant, while Sanda stammered, unable to reply. His face reddened, and he wondered why his eyes now always ended up fixed on Fuyumura so suddenly. He stared at her, and she in turn looked at him with puzzlement. She then asked him if he wants to fight her, to which Sanda shouted that he's had it with her and called her a hooligan. Amaya, however, told Sanda he could not run away as Sanpa. Their classmates already knew him as a terrorist, and surely the principal was looking for him too. If he intended to stop the funeral, Amaya said, he had to be extremely careful. He stepped closer and added that there might be a secret organization aiming to use Santa's power for evil, which meant Sanda could not afford to take any risky action right now. Sanda was impressed by his words, which seemed almost designed to stir excitement. Fuyumura, still busy, called their attention and said they needed to make a plan. The scene shifted to show a man with a strange mark on his arm. They were told they must already know why they had been summoned there. Many others stood with him, lined up before the principal. He told them this was their chance to capture Santa Claus, the figure they had long been searching for. They were the Redcoats. Principal Ashibu noted the dried holly leaf mark on their arms, which served as proof that they were legitimate members of the Redcoats. He added that they would perform their duty as staff for the funeral that day. Santa Claus had suddenly appeared not long after the death of Ono, one of their students, and he was certain that was no coincidence. He believed Santa had something to do with the child's death, and he was sure Santa would not let the funeral pass without appearing. He urged them to search for him with proper caution. The group responded in unison, "Yes, sir." They were led by the Special Search Unit, the Redcoats captain, Yagyuta Saburo, 51 years old. Ashibu greeted him, and with his stick, tapped the skin on his forehead. He remarked that he had heard Yagyuta was their greatest force. He then asked why Yagyuta was standing at the back. He admitted that he got nervous when someone was behind him, then laughed. The members of the Special Search Unit began their patrol. In Yagyuta's thoughts, they would not even need to put in much effort if Santa simply appeared on his own. He was only called the greatest force because of the wound he had inflicted on Santa 2 decades ago. He had been searching for him for a very long time, and now, at 50 years old, he knew it wouldn't be long before he joined the countless old people in the country, who were treated as nothing more than trash. As he wandered the school grounds, he reflected that even though he was on a mission, walking inside a school like that reminded him of when he was a boy, practically invincible. He rested beneath a tree and thought that perhaps he was becoming sentimental. It was time, he decided, for a cigarette break. While pausing there, he overheard the conversation between Sanda and Fuyumura. Fuyumura noted that he had been staring at her for some time and asked if there was a problem. Sanda, startled, denied it. Why, he pressed. Yagyuta was surprised by what he witnessed, thinking that this was where kids fooled around these days. He heard Fuyumura tell Sanda to cut it out, saying it was rude to look at someone like that unless he was looking for a fight. How did that even make sense? Sanda asked. Whatever, he muttered. He apologized, realizing he had offended her. Yagyuta found himself puzzled by their exchange. He could feel the melancholy in the air. Curious, he wondered if perhaps the boy had feelings for her. He listened and cheered for him. Embarrassed, Sanda admitted it was because he remembered that feeling, the night when he had heard her laugh and the sound of her voice. For him, seeing her laugh felt even less real than the night Ono had appeared. He apologized, saying it might only make her more awkward about smiling from then on. Yagyuta was struck by the boy's boldness, while the girl seemed rather combative. He thought to himself that the boy was clearly struggling. Sanda then said that once his abilities as Santa Claus were unsealed, he had already decided on something. Yagyuta leaned in, curious. Was he about to confess? Whatever it was, Yagyuta felt inclined to support it. Sanda told Fuyumura that he was sure things would only become more difficult from that point on. But even so, deep within him as Santa, he wanted nothing more than to see her smile. Children, he believed, should always have smiles on their faces. And so, he vowed that no matter what, he would make her laugh again. Fuyumura was caught off guard by this, unsure of what to make of his words. Yagyuta, however, was thrilled, savoring every moment of their conversation, while Amaya sat silently at their side. Sanda added that he believed this was the reason he had been born into that world as a descendant of Santa Claus. Yagiyuta suddenly peeked in and agreed with him. Fuyumura called out his name, but Sanda pressed on, saying he would help her with everything he had. Fuyumura replied that she also had something she wanted to tell him. But before she could say it, Sanda was shot in the arm, something he had not expected at all. Fuyumura was stunned to witness it happen right in front of her. Sanda collapsed to the floor from the impact, and his companions looked to him with concern. Fuyumura turned to see who had done it. The one who fired was Yagiyuta, who said it was the best. High school romances like this, he remarked, only riled him up more and more every year. Smiling, he added, "Oh well, work is work." All he could do now was wipe away his tears and capture Santa. As Sanda was covered in his own blood, he transformed once again. He clutched his arm to stem the bleeding. Fuyumura and Amaya were alarmed by his presence as he said it was extremely tough. Pulling up his sleeve, he revealed his mark. His work, he said, was truly a killer. Because of the bullet wound on Sanda's arm, his transformation continued until he became the muscular man once again. While he lay sprawled on the floor, Yagiyuta remarked in surprise that who would have thought Santa was hiding in the form of a child. Life, it seemed, was still full of surprises even for someone of his age. Smiling, he realized that what awaited him now would either be a promotion or a salary increase. Either way, it looked like there would be alcohol on his menu that night. But he did not expect it when a hand suddenly grabbed the one holding his gun. It was the transformed Sanda. Of all the times he could have been shot, Sanda said, it had to be right then, when he was about to have a cool moment. Who was he? Sanda asked. He then swung him around and threw him with tremendous force. Yagiyuta crashed into the wall, and the impact shattered the gym storehouse wall. The three looked on in shock at the sheer power displayed. Even Sanda was alarmed at himself for breaking through it. He admitted it was his fault and that he still could not control the output of his power. He approached to check on Yagiyuta's condition, but even when he called out, the man was unconscious. Sanda wished he had not killed him. On closer inspection, he noticed the mark on Yagiyuta's arm, intrigued by the holly leaf symbol. Suddenly, Yagiyuta kicked him in the chin, catching Sanda off guard. Getting back to his feet, Yagiyuta asked if he did not remember that mark. Sanda answered that he did not. He told him first of all to calm down. Placing his hands on his shoulders, Sanda's strength inadvertently drove him down into the floor, crushing it under the force. Sanda was startled again at what he had done. His strength was far too much. Yagiyuta resisted, gripping Sanda's wrist tightly, then delivered a fierce kick straight into his groin. The impact was brutal, and because of it, Sanda suddenly recalled something deeply unpleasant. Breaking free, Yagiyuta laughed and said that even Santa got them right where they're supposed to be. Angered, Sanda impulsively pulled at his underwear, curious to see what was underneath. In truth, he admitted he had always wondered what that part would look like when he transformed into Santa. What he saw shocked him, making him swallow hard. What was there was fully that of a grown man. Letting go of the underwear, he told himself to forget he had seen it, including the gray pubes. Yagiyuta once again took his stance and charged, declaring that the only way for him to return was to take Sanda with him. But Sanda merely caught his fist and tightened his grip, something Yagiyuta had not expected. The pain was unbearable. Sanda wondered aloud if he was truly dangerous. He could not control his strength. He ended up throwing people, breaking walls, and displaying all sorts of destructive abilities. On top of that, his banana had already ripened. He thought perhaps he really was a danger to society. Was that the reason Yagiyuta had come to capture him? He admitted he was starting to feel afraid of himself. Yagiyuta could not answer, writhing under the pressure of Sanda's grip. With no choice left, he spat in Sanda's face. Caught off guard, Sanda shut his eyes, and Yagiyuta managed to break free from his hold. Yagiyuta told him he was not dangerous to society or anything like that, calling him an old-timer. He said Sanda should not make such a big deal of himself. Picking up a barbell from the side, Yagiyuta said it was only by chance that Sanda happened to be Santa Claus, and that was the only issue here. He slammed the barbell against Sanda's head, knocking him down so his skull hit the floor. Yagiyuta admitted that was rough. He sighed, lit a cigarette, and said it was probably too late for introductions. but he introduced himself anyway as Yaguda of the Red Coats. He added that while they were there, he wanted to make clear that someone like Sanda, who gave hope to children, was no longer needed in that country. He stepped on Sanda's body, then sat on his chest. He spoke of prearranged education, prearranged marriages, and prearranged lifestyles. The country, he said, was already on its deathbed. All that was left for a child was to abandon hope and follow whatever they were told. Standing, he added that if a legendary figure like Santa Claus suddenly appeared out of nowhere, it would leave a tremendous impact on the children they were carefully raising. They could not allow him to exist in this era. From outside, Amaya and Fuyumura grew curious about what was happening inside the storehouse. The two were startled when they suddenly heard Sanda's booming ho-ho-ho. They looked at each other, unsure of what was happening. Inside, Sanda abruptly pulled off his underwear, and even Yagiuda could not help but glance at his banana, shocked by what Sanda had done. He listened as Sanda said he actually felt relieved because of what Yagiuda had told him. He once thought that Santa was a guy who used to go around killing people, but he had no idea that it was not the case after all. All that time, he had despised him. He said he should have been the one to become Santa Claus, but instead he had a fully grown man's body, superhuman strength, and eyes that always seemed filled with murderous intent. He had hated his own appearance. He doubted himself so much that he rarely looked in the mirror. But back then, and even now, Santa had always brought hope. Wasn't that what he had just said? And if that was true, Sanda declared, skis now extending from the soles of his feet, then he could stand proud in his body. He would fight with everything he had, for the sake of the children. He raised his ski-clad foot, and Yagiuda's reflection shone in the steel. Yagiuda admitted he had been foolish to bring up something that had not needed to be said. Outside, Fuyumura wondered what was happening in the gym storehouse. She thought perhaps they should go in and help Sanda, but Amaya believed they should stay put. As Sanda charged, Yagiuda leveled his gun at him. The wall shattered under Sanda's power as Yagiuda pulled the trigger. Other students nearby were startled by the sound of gunfire, but the other student dismissed it as impossible. But she admitted she had gotten a little excited by it. The one beside her said they should keep it quiet, and that she should drain the liveliness from her eyes if she did not want to be hated. Her advice was to make sure she looked dead inside. It was then announced that the funeral would begin. They lined up with flowers in hand. There was a flashback of Fuyumura and Ono looking through a book that contained a photograph of a famous sculpture of a man in the nude. Ono asked if she thought adults looked like that when naked. Fuyumura pretended to cover her eyes, but was stunned by what she saw, demanding to know where Ono had found that book. She said it did not matter if it was artwork. Children were forbidden to look at naked adults. Ono replied that when something was forbidden, it only became more enticing. While the two of them were lying side by side on a bed in their dorm room, Ono remarked that she thought adults were far too strict with them. It was not realistic, she said, that one would get cavities simply from kissing someone before marriage. She wished to return to a time when children were free to kiss those they loved. Fuyumura was shocked by the statement and asked if there was someone she wanted to kiss. Ono only threw the question back at her, asking if she herself had never wanted to try it. Fuyumura admitted it was something she had never really thought about, and if she ever did want to, it would only cause problems. The two locked eyes, and both thought of the sculpture's exposed banana from the book. Tension rose between them. As Fuyumura clenched her teeth, she felt them ache. When their lips drew closer, she thought to herself that if they both already had cavities, then she never finished the thought. Their moment fell into awkwardness, and in the end, for both of them, it still did not feel real. Back in the present, the battle between Sanda and Yaguda raged on. Yagiuda wielded his gun, while Sanda struck with the sharp skis attached to his feet. And now that the fight had broken out in the open, Fuyumura and Amaya finally saw the clash between the two. Still, Fuyumura covered Amaya's eyes, since Sanda was completely naked. To her, it felt unreal. Santa Claus, a naked man, the warmth of a person, and the sensation of waves in her heart. These were things she thought did not exist in real life. Sanda readied his fist and declared that this was for Fuyumura's smile. He threw a powerful punch, but Yagiuda dodged it. His motivation, too, was the children. He said it was for their sake. Yagiuda fired into his body, making Sanda flinch with an ouch, which puzzled him. Sanda admitted he could not afford to be captured now. Preparing a counterattack, he slashed with his skis, but Yagiuta quickly ducked, causing only the tree behind him to be cut down. The trunk crashed to the ground. In Fuyumura's thoughts, ever since she had met Sanda, she felt her life had been steadily drifting away from reality. Meanwhile, Yagiuta sat in disbelief at what had just happened. It was as if Sanda were basically immortal. And if that were not enough, he was strong and massive. If things continued, Yagiuta was certain he would be the one caught. So he hurriedly ran off. But Sanda called out, saying he would not be able to escape. From the staircase, Yagiuta fired again. Sanda declared that now that Yagiuta had seen him in his other form, he could not simply let him get away. The bullet grazed his head near his eye. Annoyed, Sanda thought to himself that this might keep him from making it to Ono's funeral. Hearing that, Yagiuta suddenly dropped his gun. He laughed, mockingly asking if Santa was truly fighting for kids. Then he asked if Sanda wanted to know why he was doing it. He took a stance to punch and declared that he did it for money, for glory. Back in the gymnasium, the funeral had begun. The principal spoke, saying that in this ceremony they would not participate in any act where they joined their hands together. Perhaps it was called prayer, he said. People often believed in gods or in heaven when they were young, but it was nothing more than a waste of time. These superstitions had accompanied humanity for nearly all of history, and they were the reason mankind had decayed to this level. The spirit of their society now, he continued, should be to cast off all that was meaningless, and so he expected them to join him in sending her off with a smile. One student silently reflected on his words. Ashibu added that they must not allow negative emotions to taint this funeral. Onii-Chan had died young in a country with an exceedingly low birth rate. She died before she could grow old and become repulsive. That was why her death was all the more sacred. He said that this event should make the students realize their value in the present. This period of their lives, he emphasized, must be spent with complete rationality. Therefore, they were forbidden from praying to God in this funeral. And just as he finished, Sanda fell from the ceiling and landed directly behind the principal, at the altar set up and covered with flowers for Ono. The students were stunned. They had not expected such a thing, and even Ashibu himself could hardly believe it. Right in the middle of their event, Sanda had appeared before everyone. From the hole in the ceiling, Yagiuta appeared down, troubled by what he saw. When Sanda stood, the bullet wounds across his body were bleeding. From the entrance, Fuyumura watched and muttered dumbass. She remembered her conversation with Ono, when Ono said she could not explain how to compare the body of the sculpture in the book to a real one. They were not allowed to look at such things. Yet, was there not beauty in the naked body of an adult? They had been impressed by it. Fuyumura herself did not know how to respond. She felt too shocked to comment if she were to see a fully naked man like that standing before her. Perhaps, she thought, she would believe he was a god. Back in the present, when the students saw Sanda standing naked before them, they wondered if he really was a god. Sanda himself was bewildered as he looked around, while Ashibu panicked. He could not believe Sanda had exposed himself in such a way, and in that place of all places. Still, he thought it would not be wise to have the students move in such an environment. Seeing this hand, those in the bleachers wondered if this was some kind of signal telling them to simply wait. Ashibu recalled the school's principle of trauma-free education, insisting to himself that under no circumstances could the students' hearts be subjected to even the slightest trauma. As they observed, Sanda's classmates began to realize he was the terrorist from the other day in class. Yet something about him felt different now. Sanda turned when he noticed Ono's picture had tilted and was about to fall. He reached for it and set it straight. Facing the altar, he said, "Might as well say it." He spoke to Ono, admitting he did not understand her. He did not know what she was planning or where she might be now. But wherever she was, he wished that she was safe. Fuyumura was shocked to hear him add that she only needed to hold on. Sanda would save her. The students whispered among themselves, unable to grasp what was happening in that funeral. Sanda's hands were pressed together before Ono's photo, as though he were praying.